Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Dave Lubin back to the show. We are looking at the year 1975. We're looking at our favorite albums in that year. This is an ongoing series, so here, enjoy, leave a comment. Let's do it.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Dave Lubin back to the channel. We are looking at various years in rock and roll. Tonight we are looking at 1975, and we are talking our top 10 favorite records. So, Dave, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great, Grant. Looking forward to talking about another great year in rock. And boy, there were some classic albums that came out of 75.
Why do I keep thinking you're going to bring up an April Wine album today? I
wonder why.
I wonder why. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to keep it loose. We're going to talk about it. Now, are these possibly the best albums of those years? They could be. They could not be. But these are just records that Dave and I really enjoy. And actually, the ones that I mention are ones that I still return to. So, sometimes your tastes change over time, but I don't know. We're here just trying to turn you on to stuff. So since we can just go back and forth, I guess, is fine. We have time. So, Dave, you want to start off with your first pick?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with something that it was very unique to the area that I was from. So when I mentioned the artist Krista Burgh here in the United States had a couple of moderate to medium hits in the 80s, got played a little bit on MTV, but back in 1975, he put out his second album. Now, what was very interesting about this particular album was it was not a huge hit anywhere, but it almost had this cultish fever in Montreal, specifically, maybe more so amongst the Anglophone population. I'm not sure. But he put out an album called The Spanish Train and Other Stories. This thing, people who are sort of in my age group and my age range and sort of the area and community where I was from, everybody knew this album. It was played on Chaume FM, which was the rock station of Montreal that still exists today. And I can tell you this album did completely, absolutely nothing in the U.S. I don't think Krista Burgh had anything going in the U.S. until he had A Lady in Red and Don't Pay the Ferryman.
There you go.
But 5 years before that, he put out this album called The Spanish Train and Other Stories. The album definitely made some noise in Canada. It hit number 64 on their charts. So, I knew various people from Toronto and whatnot, and it got some play there. But it was particularly popular in Montreal. I think, if I remember correctly, I remember Krista Burgh opened for a big group that year. I'm going to say maybe it was ELO, which is kind of a funny mix, ELO and Krista Burgh. Anyway, so the type of music that was in there in this particular one is that he created these stories. So the title song in particular, The Spanish Train, has like folklore where I went to school. So the song is one where he basically is a narrator. And he talks about how this train crashes and God and the devil are playing poker for souls. So it's kind of poetic in its nature, and it's one of those things where you can imagine teenage kids listen to this thing and go, "Oh my God, this is like the most brilliant thing I've ever seen." And it is very clever lyrics, and it's very cleverly done. And there's something about it. He really doesn't sing; he basically talks throughout the whole thing. But it's like when this thing would play, it's like, yeah, I got to hear every single word of this because he talks about how the train crashes and the devil wants the souls and God wants the souls, and they play poker. And the roundup of the song is that the devil cheats and therefore he wins more souls than God. So it's supposed to be symbolic and all that kind of stuff. What's funny about this particular song is that the folklore is that people in my class and people in the school I went to, Wager High School, there was always this talk of, hey, did you hear about so-and-so plagiarized The Spanish Train and got a 90? We didn't use letter grades like they do here in the States. We used numbers. And this thing went on and on and on. And it seemed like everybody knew someone who plagiarized The Spanish Train. I think there was a lot of, like I said, folklore to that. It might have happened once. Mm-hmm. I think eventually these teachers did catch on. As a matter of fact, I think I remember like even a few years later, I was in a class and somebody did try to pull that off and the teacher recognized it right away. But there's other good songs. I mean, there's these funny songs on this album. There's a song called Patricia the Stripper, and it's exactly that. It's about someone who strips. And a song where it's a little more singing, which is called "The Spaceman Came Traveling." So, if you want to kind of see the origins of Krista Burgh, and as I said, that Spanish Train song in particular is particularly interesting for those of your listeners who aren't familiar with it. You might find the Spanish Train to be kind of an interesting song. As I said, you put that on, you want to listen to the lyrics, you want to listen to the whole thing through. It made number 10 literally just for the title song, but there's some other good songs on it as well. So that's my number 10.
All right, cool. Good one. Yeah, I remember Don't Pay the Ferryman. I like that song quite a bit. And that's quite a big contrast between Lady in Red and that track, but I think that's probably the only hits he had here. I can't think of anything else.
He had he actually got drafted to do Arthur 2 on the Rocks, and he actually did their theme song. And it was actually a pretty good song, but he didn't. The movie was a flop, and it certainly didn't do like what the Best That You Can Do Is Fall in Love did for Christopher Cross from the first Arthur. The first Arthur was such a big hit. So,
all right, cool. All right, my first pick. I'm going to go with a band. Well, dig this pedigree. Produced by Freddie Pirro, engineered by Alan Parsons, and this is their first record. This was nominated for a Grammy nomination on Best Engineered Recording, and I will say it does sound darn good. This band kind of morphed over time. Well, not kind of, they really did. But by the time they did their last album, they kind of did a complete full circle. We're looking at the first album by Ambrosia. The self-titled album came out February 1975 on 20th Century Fox Records. And that's one of those bands. These guys started out, Dave, as a prog band. Those first 2 Ambrosia albums are proggy, but it's prog with a commercial element, a little bit more of a accessibility. There were a couple of main tracks on here that were hits, Holding On to Yesterday and Nice, Very Nice. Now, you look at this stuff, you look at the later stuff like on 180 where they basically turn into like a pop band, so to speak. But hey, think how prog was. We're talking 1975. By 1980, prog was pretty much dead. And a lot of these prog bands either got out of the business or they morphed into something else. But me personally, I like all the Ambrosia albums, but this debut, I mean, if you're into prog, a lot of the prog people know this record. Phenomenal. Great songwriting. Of course, it's great production. You've got Alan Parsons doing it. But I just think it's a wonderful record. And it's rich. It's complex. There's a lot for you. If you like that later Ambrosia stuff, I'm not sure. You may want to start here and check this out first. But I can recommend it. So that's about all I have to say about it. But yeah, the first Ambrosia album, Dave. There you go. What's your second pick?
All right, so I'm going to talk about a couple of greatest hits package on this show, and they're going to go back. I'm going to go back to back on them.
All right.
I try to avoid the greatest hits, but there's definitely been situations where I just say, hey, you know what? When I think about an impactful album on me, America's Album History, Greatest Hits, that was they had like all these individual hits and they added up. And I mean, History was really the only America album I ever owned. I mean, later when CDs came out, I bought a few compilations here and there, but I definitely like their folk rock sound. And, sometimes it's just a matter, even though it's a greatest hits album, it's really how well do the songs fit together. And even though these songs like came up like separately and came up on different albums, they really worked very well together. I mean, if you look at side 1, for instance, of this album, it starts off with A Horse with No Name, and it kind of leads off that greatest hits package perfectly. And that's such a fantastic folk rock song, in my opinion. And then it leads just perfectly into I Need You. And they do a wonderful mix into that. Then it goes into the Sandman. Sandman's another really good song on side 1. Then that goes into Ventura Highway. And then they finish up with Don't Cross the River. So it's the mix of these songs sound perfect together. They really do. And this album did fantastic. I mean, it hit number 3 on the charts. It's 6 times platinum. It's one of the, there's a lot of people I know, like myself, who they probably don't own too many individual America albums, but these songs were such big hit songs that they wanted this compilation. And then side 2 doesn't really disappoint either. It's got other classic America songs like Tin Man and Sister Golden Hair. Classics played all over 70s radio to this day. I'll give them forgiveness for Daisy Jane. That is not a song. I just never really gotten behind that one. Don't like it by them. Don't like it by the Captain and Tennille. But for as far as the rest of this album goes, great album, great compilation. And it's an album that actually what's interesting is I think with the exception of probably the Spanish Train, which I had to kind of dig up and said, hey, that came out this year. I still listen to all of these quite a bit today. Everything we're going to talk about. So
I can't say that I've heard the original version of Muskrat Love though by America though.
It's on that History album. So, or is there another version? I don't know.
I don't know. Well, obviously it was on one of their albums, but I maybe I don't have that album. I always see that History CD. If you're going used CD shopping, you see that History CD out there. I mean, like you said, it sold. It just sold like crazy. Yeah, so it's still out there. All right, that's a good pick. All right, Dave, let's see. I think my next pick, I'm gonna go with a live album. Probably considered one of the best live albums ever. But at the time, a lot of the critics didn't seem to think so. But I think it's grown in stature. This is the band's 4th album. They put out other records that they didn't feel really lived up to the way they sounded live. So I'm talking about Kiss Alive that came out September 1975. This put Kiss on the map. This put them on the map. Now they finally were making some money. So, Dave, you ever hear that story about Bill O'Coin, the Kiss manager? Casablanca Records was in such bad shape that he had to use his own private credit card to keep things afloat. So they were hoping that Kiss Alive would be the album to bring, Kiss to predominance and to help Casablanca Records. Well, they were right. That record was a big record. Well, we all know how big it is now because it's the record we think of when we think of Kiss. Because really, that's the way Kiss sounded live. Now, there's a lot of speculation that Eddie Kramer, the producer and the engineer behind this record, they went back and they re-recorded a lot of the parts again. That Peter Criss's drums are the only real thing about it. I think they piped in the audience sounds from somewhere else. Like I think they might have been, if I'm not incorrect, I thought they were like Woodstock audience recordings. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know really what's up with this record, but I do know it's got a lot of great songs, like a lot of great energy, and it does sound like Kiss live. So it is what it is. It put them on the map, and I do think it's one of the best things from 1975. So there you go. Kiss live.
I admit I never saw Kiss live. It's too bad.
I saw him in '98 on the reunion tour.
There was one year I remember I was in summer camp and they were playing, and everybody was there was people from camp who we had heard about people who didn't get sent to summer camp for the year, and they got to go to the Kiss concert. We were all so jealous because we heard the whole thing with the spitting the fire and the light show and everything on the makeup and the whole thing. Their whole show there. It would have been pretty cool to have gone to that. But yeah.
If you would have said to me and when I was a wee young lad, when I was 13, 14, if I'd still be listening to Kiss Alive now, I probably would never have even thought of that. But yeah, it's one of those records I still return to, like all these records that I'm going to be talking about tonight. So, all right, Dave, what's your next one?
All right, my next one, I got one more greatest hits package. I'm almost embarrassed to put this up because whereas I talk about with America, I would typically only listen to the greatest hits or maybe some other compilation CD. I listen to all kinds of albums of these guys of Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
But I say that this one kind of really, I think the reason why this one in particular one is important to me is because I do remember going out and getting it on its own merit because I knew like a lot of the songs on it. Basically, I had older brothers, and they used to play Chicago Transit Authority and Chicago 2 all the time. I knew a lot of the music on that. But again, what's interesting about this is when Chicago albums, to really get an appreciation of them, you have to, you think about a song like Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is? And then there's a whole instrumental that goes into that in Chicago Transit Authority. Or songs like Make Me Smile and Color My World is totally embellished by that whole Ballad for a Girl in Buchanan side in Chicago too, which I actually said was my favorite moment in Chicago. But this CD actually blends very well together. So they take those songs out, they make them into one song, one full song, and they do work together. It starts off right away with 25 or 624, and if you think about it, that is a fantastic intro song to an album. It was not on that Chicago 2, obviously. And then that leads into Does Anybody Know What Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is? And then these songs just really blend together well, and it is an excellent depiction of what Chicago, let's say, early to mid 70s is all about. You've got the biggest hits here. There's things missing. You don't have I'm a Man and Good Day Sunshine, things like that. But you've got Just You and Me. Saturday in the Park is on this. Make Me Smile is on this, and it does work. And it ends with, ironically, the very last song on the album was their first hit, Beginnings. So it does work very well. I still really, if I just want to hear like just a good mix of earlier Chicago, I can still throw this into the CD player and really enjoy listening to that. So I think, you know what, I'm including it.
You might as well be. Well, it just seems like were a lot of greatest hits records released during this period. You mentioned that Chicago. I mean, it's a flawless comp, I think. But I'm a Man wasn't that was remake by Spencer Davis, right?
Yeah,
that's probably why it's not on there. But
it was a hit on their first album, or it was a radio hit anyway.
Yeah, they were probably gonna not put that on, but was it? I can't remember. That was but that's just a single record set, right? It wasn't a double album, was it?
No, it's one, and then I actually have other compilations too. I have the 80s, and then there's one for 90s. So there's I've got a late 70s one, and then I got the 80s one. So.
All right, cool. All right, my number 3. This has to be my favorite album from 1975. I will say that. And I think it is the high mark. I mentioned this on Sea of Tranquility, and people gave me shit about it in the chat. Not in the chat, but in the comment section. But I don't care. I think this is the best album this band ever did. Some people like Sheer Heart Attack. Some people like something that's later, but come on. A Night at the Opera by Queen, I think, is a wonderful record, a turning point in their career. It's ambitious. They were at the height of their creativity, and I think this is a great record that shows how well Queen worked with Roy Thomas Baker. I think Roy Thomas Baker, in my opinion, was the George Martin, the Terry Brown of Queen, and I'm just saying, it's progressive, it's pop rock, there's all kinds of different styles. You look at it on paper and you're going, my God, we've got Bohemian Rhapsody, we've got I'm in Love with My Car, which I think is a great Roger Taylor song, Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, which is very vaudeville-esque, but you put all these tracks together and they seem to work. You've got pop singles. You're My Best Friend, written by John Deacon. I mean, that's just a pop single. Sweet Lady, Heavy Rock by Brian May, Seaside Rendezvous. There you go. We've got that whimsical music hall kind of style that Freddie Mercury likes to do. It covers just a lot of different things, but when it was brought together, everything works. I don't think that there's anything weak on this record. I mean, it's great. A lot of people may never want to hear Bohemian Rhapsody again, but it's here. This is their peak as far as I'm concerned. So Queen, Night at the Opera. That definitely is my favorite record from 1975.
So I've got this actually ranked as my fourth favorite, and that's just because this year has so many fantastic albums. But I totally agree with you. This for me. This is absolutely the best Queen album. Yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, it is overplayed to the point that, I mean, at the time, hey, I loved it, but I don't always want to hear it anymore. But there's so many fantastic songs. So right off the bat, this album just grabs you with "Death on Two Legs," and this is actually a song that's considered to be a hate letter to their first manager, Norman Sheffield. I didn't know what the song is about, but it's like this hard rocking thing. On this album, my two favorites actually are polar opposites of each other. So "Death on Two Legs" is definitely one of my favorite albums. But then I also really like the ballad, which got some harp in it, "Love of My Life." And I got to see Queen, I think it was in 1980. It was a 1980.
Hot Tour? Hot Space?
No, it would have been the Under Pressure tour. David Bowie didn't go up and sing.
Well, so the game. Oh, Under Pressure would be Hot Space.
Yeah, okay. So, but I remember I was like, okay, well, are they going to play "Death on Two Legs"? And they played it. And then, oh God, I really want to hear "Love of My Life," and they played it. And I agree. Like this album, actually, it's described as this mix of ballads, music hall, sea shanties, Dixieland, hard rock, progressive. There's even a song on it, the one leading into Bohemian Rhapsody, that I get a big kick out of, called "Good Company," and I think that's a fun song.
I love that too. And
it just leads into Bohemian Rhapsody so well. And yeah, "I'm in Love with My Car," "You're My Best Friend." I mean, it's a lot of years this probably would be my favorite album of the year. But I just, when you get to sort of the top half of 1975, the albums are just so damn good. It's hard to rank them. Maybe it should be even number 3. I don't know. But
I don't know. It's my favorite. Okay, so my number 4, another one of my favorite records, which a lot of these, kind of, when I was a kid, these albums kind of took hold, and I still listen to them. So I just did a show at Davy Cretin about Styx. We covered Equinox, and we covered Crystal Ball. That just recently aired on the channel. And I have to bring up Equinox. This was the album by Styx that really, they got signed to A&M. They were on Wood Nickel before, and this kind of is like a stepping stone. This is the album before Tommy Shaw. Tommy isn't here yet, but still, this is like a stepping stone to that Wooden Nickel period, to the A&M period. So you still got some of that proggy elements, especially on side 2, but it's a little bit more commercially acceptable. Came out in December of 75. It did certify gold just before the breakthrough release of Grand Illusion. So you thought that maybe this would have sold better back in the day, but evidently it didn't. But I think this is the reason we have Equinox on A&M, is because the 1973 Single Lady kind of took off. So that kind of prompted them to get signed to A&M. John Kuralewski, the original guitar player, he was still here. A lot of great stuff from John on this record. But then he left, and then Tommy came in. But some of the tracks on here, "Light Up" by Dennis DeYoung, "Lorelei," "Mother Dear," which is penned by Dennis DeYoung and John Kuralewski, great proggy track. I believe Rand Kelly mentions that this is one of the best Yes-like tracks without being Yes. So go dig that. "Midnight Ride," James Young is great. "Born for Adventure," another great song. This album also has "Sweet Madam Blue" on it, which kind of ends the record. A Dennis DeYoung song, a rock tour de force. Starts out with a 12-string in the beginning, and then it goes to that great rock riff. It's just heavy. I love the guitar sound on this record, but it just, Styx is evolving. Yeah, it some of it's kind of Wood Nickel like, but then it also looks to the future. But so. This is one of my favorite records in 1975. So,
yeah,
I love this record.
It was my number 11. I actually cut it for the Spanish Train. There was I don't know which I probably am more likely to listen to Equinox than the Spanish Train, but the Spanish Train was so unique to the time that I grew up in, and I said in that community and everything. So Styx Equinox, though, I can tell you I know it only went gold here in the United States. Mm-hmm. Styx was another one of those bands. We did a whole show on Supertramp. I talked about how they found their footing in Canada, specifically Montreal, prior to the United States. So Equinox actually was a huge hit in Canada. So it sold the equivalent of, I believe, double platinum. And it was kind of like a crime of the century type of situation where it made a mark in the United States, but it made like this huge dent in Canada. So they were on their way. I remember I saw Styx on the Cornerstone tour, and they acknowledged, they said that they discovered that Montreal was one of the first cities to really embrace them. So kind of cool.
Well, I want to say this, Dave. I was looking at my list, and I picked a lot of records that when they were released at the time, the critics just hated them. Ambrosia, critics like that. Kiss, no, they never like Kiss. They never like Queen. I think Queen is, back in the old days, Rolling Stone would just tear apart Queen. They wouldn't even give them any stars. They just couldn't handle it. And Styx is another one. I don't know, but I think these records really have endured. I don't know. You like what you like. So Dave, what's your number 4?
Well, no, I'm actually on 7. I'm jumping around a little.
Oh, well, I mean, what's your 4th pick?
Yeah, my 4th pick now. Well, I've already done my 5th. My Night at the Opera is my 4th. Anyway, okay. My 7th favorite is going to be Venus and Mars by Wings. So this was their 4th album. It was my favorite album they did. It did very well. Sold 100,000 copies in Canada, 1 million in the United States. It hit number 1 in the United States, along with the lead single "Listen to What the Man Said." I remember hearing that. That's a great song. But this album is just filled with great songs. There's just. I think I discovered that I like kind of like lead-in songs that lead into a bigger song. So there's 2 on this on my list here, and I'll get to my other one. But in Venus and Mars, I really like the way the Venus and Mars song leads into Rock Show. I just always thought that's such a great lead-in. He did that in his Wings Over America tour, but it's got all kinds of great different sounds on it. He's got like more of a kind of an older sound with "You Gave Me the Answer," and then he's got like the very fun Magneto and Titanium Man on it. That's like this fast-paced song about superheroes. You've got some, cool different songs like Spirits of Ancient Egypt on it. Mm-hmm. It's a fun album. That side one especially is a lot of fun because it's just so many different kinds of music, and he just switches around from like slow to fast to old styles. He just does what Bill McCartney can do because he's a brilliant musician. And for me anyway, this was the Wings album that had the biggest impact. It's definitely my favorite one. He had a lot of good ones. Back to the Eggs, a great album. So is At the Speed of Sound. But this one definitely is my favorite without a doubt. And it's of all of them, that's the one I'm most likely just put it on and say, yeah, I'm gonna just listen to this from front to start to end. So
yeah,
Venus and Mars Wings, number 7.
I can't argue with that. That's a great record. So my number 5, we're going to go with a debut album by a member of the band Yes. And as far as I'm concerned, now I probably haven't heard every solo album from any member of Yes, but I have to probably think this is right up there. I'm talking about Fish Out of Water from 1975, Chris Squire's first solo record. So this came out in November 1975 on Atlantic. It kind of picks up where Yes left off. It could have been a Yes album, I think. But, Chris Squire has such a distinct tonality, the way he sings to what he brings to Yes. But we do have some collaborators on here that work from Yes. We've got Bill Bruford is playing drums. You've got Patrick Moraz, who was on Relayer, and Mel Collins, not in Yes, but he was in King Crimson. So he's playing on this record. What a wonderful record. You get a lot of great Chris Squire bass lines. A lot of great bass playing. His bass is right up front. You got orchestral influences here. You've got it's kind of like Yes. How would I really describe it though? It's hard to describe because yes, it does sound like Yes, but you've got Yes mixed in with orchestral elements, like I said. You've got one of the great tracks on here. In fact, there's not one track that's a bad track. Hold Out Your Hand opens up with that pipe organ. I guess it was recorded at St. Paul's Cathedral, and then you've got Chris Squire's bass coming in. Bill Bruford's drumming is just absolutely wonderful. And of course, you've got Chris Squire singing on here. And it does sound like Yes, you just don't have any John Anderson. You By My Side, delicate piano. It's unbelievable. You got flute on here. The orchestral backing adds warmth. It's a wonderful track. It's a lot more like that. Silently Falling's got Patrick Moraz playing his Hammond organ solo. Chris Squire's bass, again, is just out of this world. But if you haven't heard this record and you like Yes, you will 100% like Fish Out of Water by Chris Squire. Guaranteed. It's a great record. All right, Dave, what you got?
All right. Well, yeah, you know, for my sweatshirt, you know what's coming, right? So this is my favorite April Wine album. When we did our whole series, I said over and over again, for me, it never got any better than this. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons I like this album, number one. So first of all, in terms of the album itself, it had kind of an interesting history. I'll go through it again. We talked about this on your show. This album sold 200,000 copies in Canada. At the time, that was a record. There was no other album that sold that was double platinum in Canada for a Canadian band. And yet, it never got a widespread U.S. release. But what's interesting about this album is that now, if I go into like a bar, there's only a handful of April Wine albums you'll find on there. And ironically, this one is one of them. Is you can't find Power Play, which actually got a widespread release at its time. But you can find this one. So
you can find my Power Play poster though right there.
You can find your Power Play poster, but you go into a bar, try to find If You Say K on Apple Music. You can't for whatever reason. I don't know if they banned it or who knows. But it's not so easy to find that music on there. But anyway, very very odd thing because that was a song that got play at the time. Anyway, I digress. So back to this one. It didn't get this major U.S. release. However. So you know when I go back to Canada and put on a Q107 or something like that, I can count on that. There's a good chance I'm going to hear "Ooh What a Night" or I'm going to hear, "Tonight Is a Wonderful Time to Fall in Love." Now those two songs, for instance, just to give you an example, those songs to me are much more radio friendly than most of the stuff you're going to find on Nature of the Beast. Did I love Nature of the Beast? Absolutely. But it didn't have as mass-wide appeal, and that's what I think was kind of a shame, because I think had this album gotten mass-wide appeal, I think it had the potential to become a bigger hit, because, you know, a song like I Wouldn't Want to Lose Your Love, again, it's really radio-friendly, it's really good, and these songs are really simple. I was actually listening this week to a concert that's on YouTube that they did in 2002, and when they play about 4 or 5 songs from this album, in fact, and they actually sound better than the Capitol ones because they don't have as much production. It's 4 guys. It's much simpler music, so they were able to recreate the sound better in let's say a smaller venue and things like that. This album is just filled with great songs. Don't Push Me Around. Don't Push Me Around actually was making it to U.S. sets in their early days when they were pushing like albums like First Glance and Harder Faster, just because. It was such a good rocker, but it was never released as a single. Come Hear the Band was on this concert that I'm referring to in 2002. It's a fantastic Miles song. His vocals sound just perfect on it. It was a moderate hit at the time, but kind of a forgotten song. He also does Victim of Your Love. That's one of my favorite April Wine rockers, and it kind of gets buried, but he did that. And if you look up that show in 2002. And then even, some of the, let's say some of the filler songs like Baby Dumb Got Your Soul, Highway Hard Run, they're fun songs. It's my favorite April Wine album. And Yeah, that's my number 5, it's my number 6. In another year, probably would have ranked higher. Ironically, I think when we did the First Glance album, even though I say I like this one better, First Glance I think was my first or second favorite album of that year. But just because the albums coming up are just such classics. So,
all right,
there we go.
Excellent. Of course, I can't argue with that because it's the Great April Wine, ladies and gentlemen. The Great April Wine. You know what I'm going to have to do now and see if I can find. When I go out tomorrow, I'm going to get on they have like some kind of digital jukebox. I'm going to go and look and see if any April Wine is on there.
Oh, it'll be on there, but you'll see.
There won't be any power play.
I think you'll find enough is enough, and maybe any way you want it. But you can't go look up Apple Music. You can't find FUCK. You can't find the Power Play album as a whole. You can find the song here, song there. Enough is available all over the place.
Weird.
Yeah.
Why would they not have? I know this is a tangent, but it doesn't make sense that they would not have the whole album.
I don't know. There must have been some sort of rights thing. I don't know. It's very odd because you can find Animal Grace. You can find but for that Power Play album, you can get it on if you have Canadian iTunes, you can get it. But for some reason, the American iTunes, you can't find that album.
Very odd.
Yeah.
Well, thank God I've got the original Capitol CD, so I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, I have it too. So it's actually in here somewhere. But
all right, cool, excellent choice. Like I said, I can't complain about that. My number 6, I'm going to go with the 7th studio album by this gentleman. Actually, this is like one of the first records that he did with his backing band since 1969. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere, and I'm going to go with Neil Young and Crazy Horse Zuma, which. What a wonderful record this is. So evidently there was like a 6-year gap because the original guitar player in Crazy Horse, Danny Wheaton, died of a heroin overdose in 1972. But the boys are back. I mean, they've made appearances on his records, but not a whole album. So this was also recorded like in a house, and that's why it's named Zuma, because it was like right off of I think it was like Zuma Beach in Malibu, David Briggs' house. That's where they recorded it. So it's kind of a lot different than what Neil had done in the past. But my God, it's a great record. It blends gritty rock with country tinge folk. It's got some introspective ballads. Plus you've got the iconic Cortez the Killer. 7 minutes and 29 seconds of just musical bliss. You get Neil Young and playing a lot of leads, a lot of guitar on this record. And, I think it's just a wonderful song. I think he's still playing it. I think he played it like this last year. He was playing Cortez the Killer again. So I think it's a great song. You also got Through My Sails, which is an outtake, so to speak. Well, I guess. In 1974, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young were trying to do another record, and the whole thing just fell apart. But this is a acoustic number that's on at the end of the album that's got, Crosby, Stills, and Nash on the backing vocals. That's also absolutely wonderful. What else? Stupid Girl, great track, double track vocals. Drive Back. Some of these songs, like Barstool Blues is great, kind of a mid-tempo rocker. It's just a great album. It's Neil Young. When you think Neil Young and Crazy Horse, this is one of those records that I think of. Highly influential record. So there you go. Go check it out if you haven't. But a lot of the Neil Young fans will go, So that's my number 6. All right, Dave. You're up.
All right. So my number 5 is an album I've talked to you about before. And that's Crisis What Crisis by Supertramp. So when we did the Supertramp show, I might have surprised everyone. I said this is of the 4 main Supertramp albums is actually my favorite. It wasn't anybody else's favorite. As a matter of fact, Supertramp kind of took a little bit of a dip. The Crime of the Century album comes out. They they put out those first two albums, and I remember you and I talked about those, and not too impressive. And then out of nowhere, they come up with Crime of the Century, simply a musical masterpiece, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And then they put out this, and for whatever reason, the public did not like it. However, I didn't agree with the public on that. I think it was, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's always been my favorite. And I was talking before about how I really like these little intro songs that lead into like a bigger song.
Mm-hmm.
And this album, I think maybe that's why I like it so much, is that I like the way that Easy Does It song, which starts off this album, leads into Sister Moonshine, which is my favorite Supertramp song. And the Sister Moonshine is such a, it's like this fast pace, very, it's just like this good, like feel good type rocker, progressive rocker. That the vocals, of course, sound great, and that's what you would expect. But then this whole album's pretty good. It goes into Ain't Nobody But Me. That was the only single that came out on this. But there's some other great songs on this, like Another Man's Woman, Lady. And then the second to last song on this album is always one of my favorite Supertramp also. It's called The Meaning. The album, as I said, didn't do too well. It peaked at number 44 in the USA, so it dropped from Crime of the Century. So Crime of the Century made like decent noise in the United States. It was a humongous hit in Canada. So because it was such a big hit in Canada, this did better in Canada. It did sell 100,000 copies, so not bad. That's platinum. But Supertramp would essentially have to rebound from a popularity standpoint on their next album, even in the quietest moments. And then, of course, they had the massive international hit, which was Breakfast in America. But again, if don't ignore that album. It's filled with great music. For me, it's interesting. All four of those Supertramp albums, they all have kind of their place. So. I say that one's my favorite. Maybe that's just because it's unique and because other people didn't like it. But you can't go wrong with Crime of the Century or A Breakfast in America. You're in for a good listen and just enjoyable, good, well put together, produced music. So can't go wrong with any of those.
All right, cool. All right, my number 7, and I wasn't sure if I was going to include this or not, but we're going to include it. We're looking at a record that if you're into vinyl, this is not an album you want to buy on vinyl, because this record is over 67 minutes long and it's on a single slab of vinyl. So you want the CD for this. And I'm talking, and when you think of something like that, who on earth made records that were just so long that they would hardly fit on the side of a record? Well, we're talking Todd Rundgren, and the record we're going to talk about is Initiation. This record came out May of 23rd, 1975 on Bearsville. It's kind of an odd record. It covers a lot of different styles because all of side 2 is basically pretty much all keyboard experimental weirdness. Side 1's got pop songs. It's got some kind of progressive type songs, but this record is where he seemed to embrace, that whole synthesizer progressive type of thing. Now, we know before this, Utopia put out a couple of prog albums. This is kind of in that vein, but it might even be even further out. So this, I mentioned that this record was 67 minutes long. I think this is the longest album ever on one piece of vinyl. So the record starts out with Real Man, which is a very melodic, soulful album. One of Todd Rundgren's best tracks as far as I'm concerned. I believe this was a hit. Of course, it's it's one of his highlights. Let me leave it at that. Then you kind of have an experimental piece on here called Born to Synthesize, where Todd's using his voice as like the primary instrument. And it's like processed through synthesizers. I don't know what he's doing. He's a wizard, a true star. But then you've got other things that are phenomenal. Eastern Intrigue, which is 5 minutes long. Nod to Eastern mysticism. Funk elements. Eclectic. It's a great track. Initiation, the title track is 7 minutes. It's kind of like I'd say Initiation could be Yeah, it's kind of a dynamic prog type of piece. But one of the crowning achievements that I like on this album is the ending track for side one, Fair Warning. It's very slow, kind of a fusion style ballad. You've got Edgar Winter on saxophone on here making a guest appearance. Great stuff. Now, side B, I can't say that I returned to that all that much, but it's 36 minutes of just experimental progginess, synthesizers. I think Rand Kelly, we've mentioned Rand on this program, absolutely loves this record. So it's very experimental, but I think you can get a lot out of it. I think most people are going to dig side one the best. I think side one on this record is just absolutely perfect. But if you want to see Todd really get an experimental, you're going to have to check out side two. But how could I do 1975 without mentioning Initiation by Mr. Rundgren? So there you go. So, Dave, what's your next one?
Well, so I'm not as big a fan of this guy as many people, but man, did he put out a fantastic album in 1975. And it's definitely my favorite album he ever put out. And that's Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. As you see, I have this on CD and album. First of all, I got to say, in terms of like a trio of songs to start an album, I don't know that there was ever a better one than Thunder Road, 10th Avenue Freeze Out, and Night. I just love everything about those songs and how they lead into each other. And once I hear one, I want to hear all three of those. Backstreet's a pretty good song too, but it's just those first three. You just got everything. You've got the power singing and the strong guitar of Bruce Springsteen on here. You've got Clarence Clemens on the saxophone. Mm-hmm. And you've got Stevie Van Zandt is doing some background vocals on this. It's as I said, I really love those first three songs, and then I've always really loved the final song on their Jungle Land. I mean, what a way to close out that album. I'll be honest, like when you go in between, it's good, but not as. But it's those four that make the album for me. Born to Run, believe it or not as big a fan of that as I am other songs on the album. That's not to say I don't like it, but it's not impactful for me as for whatever reason those other ones are.
What do you think that those other songs are just so impactful and so great that how can you compete? You can't, those other songs are fine, but they're just overshadowed by the greatness of the rest of it.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's just they're just such great. Yeah, they're fantastic songs. As I said, he has this strong finish with Jungle Land. So it was obviously a huge album. I mean, whenever you look at like best albums of all time, this is obviously all over all these kinds of charts. It's ranked 19th, in fact, on Rolling Stone's Greatest 500 Albums. It's 7 times platinum. It peaked at number 3. It's an absolute classic, and it really should be. I did see Springsteen once at the Forum. I saw him in the River. So really, my 2 favorite albums are this one and Darkness at the Edge of Town. And luckily, because it was the River, he played most of the songs from both of those albums. And the Darkness at the Edge of Town has a bunch of really powerful songs too, like Candy's Room and Badlands and songs like that. But this one is definitely my favorite of his. As I said, there's years where maybe I might say this was my favorite, but we're going to get to my top 2, and they were impactful for me for other reasons. So,
all right, cool. I must say, though, out of all the Bruce Springsteen, well, I'm not a big Bruce Springsteen guy.
Yeah.
But I will admit to you now that Born to Run's a damn good record. All right, so my number 8, I'm going to go with Katy Lied from Steely Dan. My favorite Steely Dan album, by the way. Came out March of 1975 on ABC Records. This record, Dave, is not so much the core band anymore. Everybody's gone. This is now when Steely Dan entered their studio phase. So you've got Donald Fagen, Walter Becker, of course. And then you've got session players like Jeff Porcaro. You've got Michael McDonald on here doing vocals. You've got Larry Carlton and Rick Derringer supplying guitars. It's a great record. It sounds, production-wise, it's a little hokey because I think they had some issues somewhere with Dolby, and I don't know. There's some productions. Oh, I know what it was. They were using like an early version of the DBX noise reduction system, and it malfunctioned, and so they lost a lot of high end. But that's all right. It kind of gives it kind of a darker sound, and I think actually some of these songs kind of benefit from it. But it starts off with Black Friday, which is a wonderful, wonderful track. Bad Sneakers is on here. Rose Darling, very melodic. I love that song. My favorite off this side though is Dr. Wu. Great standout track. You got a sax solo by Phil Woods. It's great. What else? Everyone's going to the movies. Very upbeat. Your Gold Teeth 2. The whole record. I don't think Steely Dan ever put out a bad record. I mean, I've always loved this record, just the way it sounds. There's just something about it. It captures just some moment in time. And I just like this. Because this is before we've gotten to Asia where things kind of get a bit slicker. So it's just kind of in between. This is right before, Royal Scam. So I think of all these records, this still stands out to me, Dave. It's my favorite. So, but I like the whole thing. I like the sequencing, everything that makes that record great. I like. Sometimes I guess I wish it had a little bit better sound, but the material's so great that it overshadows that issue with the sound. So there you go. Steely Dan.
Yeah, I always like listening to Steely Dan. They've never been my favorite, but it was, just yesterday I remember a Steely Dan song came on the radio, and I was thinking, I don't pay enough attention to Steely Dan. I really don't, because they were darn good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was a period in my 20s. Man, I was playing a lot of Steely Dan all the time. I might have burned myself out on it, but I could still listen to it, I cannot. They're just absolutely great players. And the arrangements, the songwriting, it was just magical. I don't know. You don't always have to listen to it, but it always makes a big impact.
Yeah, my two favorites by them have always been Ricky Don't Lose That Number.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the one on Can't Buy a Thrill? Dirty Work. I always love Dirty Work.
Dirty Work's phenomenal.
Yeah, I love that. I love that song.
Love that record. All right, cool. So what's next?
All right, we're getting to my number 2, and musically, I would say this was the best album of the year, but I went with a very choice that was very personal to me for my number 1. And once again, ELO nailed it. They came up with this album, Face the Music, and it was another perfect album. And I, from time to time, what is my favorite ELO album? Is it Face the Music or is it a New World Record? In recent years, I've been more on the side of a New World Record, but I used to really bang the drum for Face the Music. It's just another one of those songs. It starts off with the haunting Fire on High that was often used on the Wide World of Sports back on the day. Then it goes into Waterfall, this fantastic haunting ballad. Then one of their most popular songs up to that point, Evil Woman, comes on, and then it ends with a kind of a forgotten song, but was played quite a bit at the time, Night Rider. That's another fantastic ELO song, but it's oxymoron. I mean, everything I'm saying, great, fantastic, wonderful. Actually, for the longest time, my favorite ELO song was Poker, the song that opens the side 2 of this album. So this fast-paced rocker, and then it goes, and then it finishes up with Down Hometown, which is another amazing ballad. Strange Magic is on this. Another like haunting Jeff Lynne tune. The album, interestingly, it only reached gold status, which kind of surprised me in the United States. I thought it was a bigger hit than that. Evil Woman, because Evil Woman was hit number 10. Strange Magic,
yeah.
14. Did it really only sell 500,000 copies in the United States? Like, I'm thinking, is the stats that I was looking at correct? It doesn't seem right.
Seems low to me.
Yeah, I think so too, because as I said, the album itself got to number 8, so I don't really get it. And as I said, it had a top 10 and a top 20 hit, and those songs are still played today, like even over time. So Anyway, it's Jeff Lynne did it again, and as I said, sometimes it's a tomato thing too. Which do I really think is the best ELO album? Is it Face the Music or A New World Record? But I put it number 2. I think it's the best musical album of this particular year. But I'm going to talk about my favorite album of the year, and it was a very important album in my music taste and also film taste. So we are getting there.
We're getting there. All right, my number 9. I'm going to go with a little band out of Canada. You might have heard of them. Dave, I don't know, maybe. But this is when this band arrived, pretty much, because the previous drummer quit. We got a new drummer named Neil Peart.
Yeah.
And the album is Rush Fly By Night. Came out February 15th, 1975. Produced by Rush and Terry Brown. We've mentioned Terry Brown before. What do you call this? Hard rock, progressive rock, kind of a little bit of both. But you have to admit, this song rocks, and this album rocks. And it starts out with the song Anthem. And Dave, it rocks, right? Come on. Anthem, great opening track, Best I Can. You've got another song, Beneath, Between, and Behind. We've got By Tor and the Snow Dog. 8 minutes, and that is one of the standout tracks. Yeah. We also have the title track, Fly By Night, which is still played on American rock radio today, probably every day. I could probably hear it here. Making Memories, Rivendell. I think this is a phenomenal record. But it's totally different if you're thinking of the first debut album, which is just pretty much kind of Rush doing Led Zeppelin, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what else to call it. But Neil Peart totally takes this band, and he's writing all the lyrics, and Getty and Alex are doing all the music. I just think it's quite a shift from what they were doing with that bluesy hard rock. But I think this is a great record. I still think it stands up.
Was Working Man on that?
No, Working Man's on the debut.
Okay, because you know, I don't know if you know the story. Apparently, is that their first U.S. recognition was right here in Cleveland, Ohio, and it was played. Working Man was in fact played. So, I thought for some reason it was from that album.
Nah, it's off the debut, but hey, either one's a good record. So there you go. How could I not mention 1975 without Rush? I guess I could have talked about Caress of Steel, or was that 75 or 76?
That was the next year, I think.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there you go.
That had the classic. I think that one has Lakeside Park on it.
And Bastille Day.
Yeah, and Bastille Day. Yeah.
I do like Caress of Steel. We used to play that all the time when I was a kid.
I like old Rush. I think sometimes old Rush gets forgotten.
Yeah. All right, so there you go. That would be my number. What was that? Number 9. So what's your final pick?
All right, so I my favorite album. I'm going back to one of my soundtracks, and so the soundtrack had an interesting history with me. I'll get into it. This movie comes out. And I'm pretty young at the time. I think I'm about 10 years old. And frankly, I don't even know what the heck is going on at the screen half the time with this movie.
Uh-oh.
But I was absolutely mesmerized by it. Actually, I'll have to have one of my older brother watch this, because he was the one who told me to go see the movie. I went to go see the movie, loved the movie, but I didn't really understand the movie, and I was just asking question after question, and there's certain things that he did not want to explain to a 10-year-old, and some things he was comfortable explaining to a 10-year-old. Actually, my brother had no problem explaining anything to a 10-year-old. I didn't always comprehend it. So the movie I'm talking about is Tommy.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I got to tell you, this the reason I picked this as number 1 is because realistically, this kind of changed my whole taste in music. So my interest in music as a kid was my mother buying me, Broadway albums, buying me The Sound of Music, Mary Poppins, stuff like that, because she didn't want to be listening to rock music, right? But I really liked that stuff, and got to know, for listening to Fiddler on the Roof or whatever. And then slowly I had this influence of rock music because I had older brothers. So that taste changing really kind of changes here, because suddenly I've got kind of a mesh. I've got like Anne Margaret and Oliver Reed, but I've also got Roger Daltrey and Elton John. Now, did I have any? And Eric Clapton is in this. And do I have any idea who the hell the Who are when I see this movie? No, I have no idea. I knew who Elton John was because Elton John was back in 1975 was like he was God, right? Mm-hmm. Actually, I always like to describe this. The second time I went to go see this movie, I lived in an area of Montreal called Côte Saint-Luc, Quebec, and it was a huge thing because the little Côte Saint-Luc shopping center opened up a little movie theater. So they would show sort of second runs. So probably now we're in about maybe 1976, and they show Tommy. And I just remember that a lot of these kids who go see this movie are like bored as heck. And then all of a sudden, Elton John comes on as the pinball wizard, and it was like, everybody's like cheering. It was like Elton John was actually there. This album, though, really, it just transitions you from like enjoying just sort of like soundtrack Broadway music into starting to really appreciate rock and roll. Mm-hmm. One performer I have to bring out specifically was, I didn't know who Tina Turner was. But man, is she good in this movie. I always said that the scene the total scene stealer, and there's a lot. This movie is like it's like one long, wild drug video, really, in many ways. But I always thought the person who stole this movie and with her one scene was Tina Turner. She didn't become a big star on her own until about 5 years after that, but I never forgot this performance. It was so scary, but she nails it, and her with that voice of hers. And her performance, I'm surprised she didn't get more movies because she was just absolutely fantastic in it. As I said, I'm a kid. I don't know who this is. And, she made more of an impact on me than Elton John, which was really saying something, although he was fantastic in that too, wearing those big high platform shoes. And then everything about this movie, like the side two of this album is like you start off with Tina Turner as the Acid Queen. Then you have the freaky Paul Nicholas playing that cousin Kevin torturing poor Tommy. I remember I didn't want to watch it, but I was watching it. I don't want to go into the Keith Moon scene. So let's go right to this Elton John.
We'll just leave Keith Moon out of this right now.
I'm gonna leave it out of this. I think I prefer let's not go there. And so then what happens over time is I start saying, my brother told me, well, wait a second, there's people who hate this album. Mm-hmm. The Who diehards, they hate it. So then he plays me the real one. And then, then I start with the comparisons, like two songs in particular. The instrumentals are definitely much better on that first album, like the prologue. I mean, there's nothing like that opening to the original Tommy the Who. It's just such a fantastic instrumental. Then they did another version of The Amazing Journey on this, which does work on this. They have it that they're all in an arcade, but I do like the original Amazing Journey better. But there's fun stuff in here. You've got Jack Nicholson in here playing, doing "Go to the Mirror." Although again, I like the Who's version of "Go to the Mirror." But it is kind of fun because there are certain things in this album that I like better, and it was a movie that after that I really started. I went out and I remember getting a Tina Turner album, and then. Eric Clapton to me was kind of and this wasn't really my favorite, but I remember getting really interested in the Who and buying Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy and eventually I bought Face Dances and I bought whatever album it was that had Squeeze Box on it. So I became like a medium big Who fan after that. I really did start to like them. So as I said, after that, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm all in. And, now I want to listen to rock music. And that was it. So back with the Broadway stuff. So there you go.
All right, cool.
My number one.
All right. My number 10, I'm going to go with a little record that, well, kind of very experimental. This was not a critic's darling either. That seems to be my theme for tonight. But I'm going to go with the 10cc's, the original soundtrack, came out in March of 1975. This has the absolutely beautiful and incredible I'm Not in Love, which was, well, you'd have to basically say that's her signature song, hitting number 1 in the UK and number 2 in the US. This record kind of made 10cc kind of brought him into the public spotlight, so to speak. I want to mention that it's funny. They were on they made a transition from the original label to Mercury Records, and that was like a $1 million deal, and which seems to be a lot for 1975 or anything in rock and roll band, which is amazing. But it was recorded in 1974. Eric Stewart produced it. He was the engineer on it, mixed it. But the thing is, the great "I'm Not in Love." Have you ever seen like how they put this song together, Dave? I mean, it's layered 100 times with vocal, and each member had to take a fader and bring up all those different vocal parts. I mean, I don't know how they would have done it, because I don't know. What did you have then? 24 track maybe? But it's very experimental. Great song. If you haven't heard it, go find "I'm Not in Love." But anyway, so this album did fairly well. What was I going to say? You may look at this original soundtrack, you might go, well, is this a concept record or not? But no, it's not really. They're like some, artistic thematic elements, but I wouldn't really consider this a concept album like the Who, Tommy, or anything. But for the most part, this is thought of as the commercial, or considered the commercial yet creative peak, I would say, for 10cc. And after the record, How Dare You, then Godley and Cream left, and then it's just down to Eric Stewart and Graham Goldman. If you like 10cc, you like "I'm Not in Love," I think you might want to check this album out. So
I think 10cc is a really underrated band. They like, people know them for the Things We Do for Love and "I'm Not in Love," but they have a whole catalog of songs that I really like. I had brought them up on a show we did a few, I can't remember what year, 77 or whatever.
Right.
The one that we had, the Things We Do for Love, and that Honeymoon with Beach Troop song. But they have like so many, like the Dreadlock Holiday. That was a great song. I don't know if you remember that one, but that was a fun song they had in the late 70s, and they have all kinds of fun stuff. Wall Street Shuffles. I mean, that's
Wall Street Shuffle.
There's a great song for you. So.
I mean, none of their stuff really takes you instantly. You have to. It's more like something that you can get into after repeated listenings, I think. But I think "I'm Not in Love," of course, which is great. "Things We Do for Love" is great. Those are just basic pop songs, I think. But "I'm Not in Love," you think about that song, and it's so majestic and so creative and such a gigantic piece of work. It's funny to think that it's a hit, but man.
It was a huge hit.
It was a huge hit.
Yeah, it was their biggest hit. That one and "Things We Do for Love." I think that one might have been the bigger hit, I believe.
Probably.
Yeah.
But anyway, there you go. There's my number 10.
All
10cc, original soundtrack. So check it out. Dave, you have anything else like honorable mentions or anything to mention real quick? Or
it's funny. I was talked about how I went out and bought music. So like I said, I did buy Tina Turner, the Acid Queen. I bought her version, and I became somewhat familiar, and then I kind of forgot about her, and then all of a sudden, then in the 80s, she became she totally reinvented herself and just became a huge megastar, bigger than she ever was with Ike, and we lost her not too long ago. So
yeah. But there you go. All right. I want to thank Dave Lubin for joining me on this episode. 1975, ladies and gentlemen. We want to hear from you in the chat. What are your favorite records? What are your top 10 albums from 1975? I always look at all the comments, so please leave a comment. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Leave a thumbs up. You know what to do. Dave, what's the status of your channel right now?
So we will get back to the soundtrack show. Give me a bit of time.
Okay.
We'll get
back. Dave will be back. So, check out his channel. We'll put the link down below. All right. We'll see you on the next one. Next time, we'll be looking at 1974. That'll be good. I think that'll be a great show. All right, everybody. Thank you. Leave a comment. We'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.